There we go. All right, everybody clap, snap, you know.
Get that snap button in there for episode 3.
Episode number 3, Broker's Disclosure. Here we are.
Yes.
And we have a special guest, special treat today. That is not the case. We have Bob Blades, all the way from Kingston, Missouri, is joining us today.
Wow. Hi, Bob.
The big town of Kingston.
Thanks for having me.
That's my hometown, actually. A little trivia. And today we are going to ask you all about appraisals.
Do you know anything about appraisals?
I'll have some answers.
Okay.
We're like realtors. We just wing it through.
Have you been through a house before?
But anyway, so let's, Ashley, why don't you explain appraisals to us a little bit, like a brief overview, and then we'll really dive into it with Bob.
With home ownership, especially, of course, with us, we deal with them as long as there's no cash deals.
Yep.
You're always going to have an appraisal for a loan, whether it's FHA, conventional, VA loan, government, anything, you're going to have it because a bank's not going to lend to anybody saying, hey, you're paying $200,000 for this, but it's only worth $150,000. So that's where our lovely appraisers come in.
So basically an appraisal justifies the price point to the lender.
Correct.
And assures them they're not lending or throwing good money after bad.
Correct.
Okay?
Yes. So.
But by definition, appraisal an appraisal is an opinion of value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes my opinion of value will end up less than your contract price.
Yeah.
Not always, but you know, you guys are professionals too. You usually know what you can sell
Ballpark-ish,
for.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, very seldom do we differ in prices.
Correct.
I mean, it does happen, not all the time, but yeah.
Well, and we help each other out a lot in the fact that we keep all of our comps. So we're able to tell you guys, okay, and whenever we go into a listing, we're halfway smart real estate agents where we say, hey, this is what things are selling for in your area in the last year and a half. Here's what your subdivision has sold for. They've had these, you know, we try to do some of your work in the fact where we say, oh, you have a 1-car garage. This one sold next door with a 2-car garage. So it's going to be valued a little bit higher. And so we try to help them, which in the end I hope helps you guys, where their values and their purchase price and your value isn't astronomically away from each other.
And to expand on that just a little bit, you guys, we're in a town of what, about 10,000 here in Chillicothe.
Yep.
You know, you're from a town of 500 or 600, and and there's little towns all the way around here that we all sell houses in and appraise houses in. And that market can vary quite a bit from town to town. And there's some, you know, like normally the larger the town, the more money this house might be worth. That doesn't always come into play. Like there's a town, 25 mile east of here that the values aren't as high there as they are here and whatever, 25 mile west of here. So.
That's what I was going to say. You go west and then it gets a little bit more expensive. Get closer to the city.
Land especially.
Yeah.
And I think something that's really unique about us all being in a rural community is like if you go to the city, appraisers down there, they kind of have it easy, I feel like, because you go into a subdivision and all those houses were built the same year by the same guy. They're all about the same size, and there's just so many comps down there. Whereas up here, nothing's going to line up exactly because nobody built houses like that. Like one individual built one house, and it's unique to the area or to that town.
Right.
And it makes your job as an appraiser probably a lot tougher.
It makes it a little tougher because, like you say, you might have a newer ranch-style house, and right beside it's an old 2-story house, and the next house down the street is a double-wide or a manufactured home or modular home. Or some have basements, some don't. Some have garages, some don't. Some have outbuildings, some don't. Some are sitting on an acre or 2 or 3 and they're still in town.
Or have rental income coming on the top of the garage. So you get all the good stuff. All the good stuff.
I like to make it interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
My first question for you is, we mentioned your opinion of value. We do, as real estate agents and brokers, we give our buyers an opinion of value using comps or just our expertise and knowing the area where they're located, what they have. So our opinion of value versus the appraisal. Can you go into that a little bit more? Like how those two things differ. Just because the agent says it's one price, just because a buyer is willing to pay that price, what I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but like
I know what you're trying to say, but
yes,
I don't know that I've got a good answer for that because it's just like your opinion, my opinion can differ.
Right, exactly.
But we might look at the house a little different than you guys do. I mean, we've got, we're going to look at the, breaker box, the heating and cooling, the, fit, trim, finish, and stuff like that. And normally when you look at a house, it's full of furniture. Pictures are on the wall and everything like that. Sometimes when we go after that, they've moved out and that house never looks as good with stuff out of it as it does in it. Unless it's a brand new house, of course.
Right.
But that's really not answering your question
Well,
very well. But like I say, maybe we look at some things you don't look at or you miss, or of course we miss stuff too, but
Yeah.
I think too is whenever some appraisers and or agents go into properties, like you said, everybody looks at it a little differently. You can also notice like the age of things, like you say, that furnace is brand new, or that one's getting a little old, and it may be something that a listing agent, not necessarily one of us, overlooked that and didn't put that in there, and whenever they get excited to tell that person that they're listing with, we want to list your house, it's worth this much, and that price tag on it could be a lot less because or needs to be a lot less because things are older in it, and roof, big ticket items like windows and all that stuff. So
windows, trim, roof, quality of the basement, whether it's cracked up or not cracked up, water leaking in it, and maybe the day you went and looked at it, it hadn't rained in 2 or 3 weeks, and it rained 3 inches the next day when I was in the house.
And it's all sitting in the basement.
And that certainly causes issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you are one of the only appraisers, or one of the few around that does VA loans. Is that correct? And
there's several, but in this county, maybe not. I was
going to say, anytime I've done a VA loan, I think you were the appraiser. Can you explain a little bit about the difference between like a VA appraisal and a conventional loan appraisal?
There's not too much difference. VA, FHA, USDA, they're all real close together. They all got guidelines. Basically,
so you actually have like a checklist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
And it's basically safety, livability, and things like that. Like, I don't know. In this area, we run a lot of houses got a wood stove or a wood furnace.
Yep.
That's okay. That's great to have that. But you also have to have a permanent heating
source or alternative backup.
The wood stove can only be your backup or whatever, even though you might use it solely all the time or whatever. But anything built prior to 1978, I think the lead paint issue, that's always an issue with VA. Safety, like handrails on steps, anytime it's 18 inches or more, 3 steps or more, and stuff like that. But that's something that maybe you guys don't notice when you go to a house. Maybe there's not a rail around the patio or the deck, and it is 2 feet off the ground or whatever.
And what are the rungs can only be 4 inches? Is that what it is? On the banisters and stuff, for kids to not put their heads and stuff.
I think that is correct, but actually in VA they don't specify that figure.
Gotcha.
Okay.
They leave a lot of that up to, I want to say zoning, but maybe it's kind of like appraiser choice or whatever,
Maybe you should just try to put a kid's head in there.
Brooklyn's gonna have one here. You can just pack it around with you at work, see if her kid will fit.
Just try it. We're gonna
see how this
seems like a bad idea.
I guess another big thing that I think a lot of the newer builds are not going to have issues with are like the GFCIs or in government loans have to be anywhere near a water source, correct?
That's not a VA requirement, but that is an FHA requirement.
Okay.
And normally VA and FHA run real close together,
Yeah.
but that is one place
That
that
separates.
we as a VA appraiser, we don't specify that.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't either. I just thought they were
We
I
all-
just thought
we just-
GFCI outlets are
Yep.
always good to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah,
If
they're
you're
good to
gonna
have.
build-
Yeah, they are good to have.
It's-
And what is the rule? Is it 6 feet from a water source? Is that the general rule? GFI outlets?
Oh, I don't
You
do
don't know?
FHA.
Okay, all right.
I did used to, but I don't remember. But
Okay.
I think it's 3. But I could be wrong.
Okay.
I could
All
be
right.
wrong
All
in
right.
saying that.
Yeah. I'm always. That's what
Yeah.
I'm always looking for them.
Yeah.
Anywhere I go,
Yeah.
I'm like, is
Yeah.
it? Or
Yeah.
do they have them? Yeah.
Yeah.
In the kitchen and outside in the bathroom.
Yep.
You gotta have
Yep.
GFCI.
And then another thing that we run into around this area is private septics
Oh yeah.
or lagoons, and there are some private water sources, whether it's a cistern or a well,
Yep.
and VA's a little vague on that. They kind of go by the zoning norms in that area, but it can be kind of iffy because there's houses around. I know in Caldwell County where we live, it wasn't zoned years and years ago.
Right.
Right.
And there's some places that are just on 1 or 2 acres, where now you have to be on 5 acres, and there's still septics on those 1 or 2 acres that are, X number of
You know
feet
that.
from a house.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really
All
matter.
about
I mean,
Yeah.
as long as it's no evidence of failure or,
Right.
so.
Well, we've ran into the problem where the zoning, a township used to be a township. It is no longer a township. They had turned an old well, I believe, into a septic. Or used that wall
Yeah.
as a septic.
The show, yeah.
And then had ran it through codes at that point in time of the town next door, or that county. Then now litigation is possibly getting involved, and that zoning is like, we don't know anything.
Yeah.
We don't know any rules or regulations on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So who's at
Thanks for
fault?
helping.
Yeah,
Right.
you wonder if it's grandfathered in, or
Yes. Yeah.
is that the proper terminology, or
Yeah.
or it just isn't right, one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's good to know that info, but like if in this case, this was a person who was remodeling. It was basically a new build on an old foundation, is what they were doing, and beautiful building, beautiful house, and anyways, it was, you go back to codes thinking that they're going to have the answers, and they did whenever they put it in there, and the answer was yes, go ahead. And now it's a no. That who's at fault of that? In that situation, and all of us were all confused because things change, and
Well, like you say, all these counties around here, and I think even Livingston, they're zoned. I think the only county around here that's not zoned maybe Davies County.
Yeah.
But still, there's no compliance officer that comes out and actually inspects
Yep.
Yeah.
a house or a new
Yep.
a remodel or a new build. I mean,
And that's where the-
you're supposed to bring it up to code, but some of them there is no code,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and there's no enforcement. And when a house is remodeled or a new house, I have lenders ask me every once in a while they want a copy of the certificate of occupancy. There is none around.
Right.
Nobody does it. They don't have.
That sounds like you've been in Hamilton too much.
Yeah.
I've heard that term thrown around quite a bit here lately.
And maybe it boils down to, some of these small counties don't have the tax revenue to hire that person.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So.
I've got a question. So I work with a lot of first-time home buyers, and they have a hard time understanding the difference between a home inspection and an appraisal. Sometimes they come to me and they say, well, I have to have an inspection. And I'm like, well, no, you don't have to. You have to have an appraisal. But then it comes to, like you have, which this would be like kind of like FHA, but you have different safety things that you have to see or find, or, like lead-based paint, it has to be painted. Whereas a home inspector may mark it, but it's not like you have to fix it. You have anything you want to?
Their conditions being different than your
Yeah, an appraisal is way more generic than a home inspection. A home inspection is way more detailed, or should be.
Yes, yes. Because you're paying for that separately. The appraisal that you're paying for is for the loan. You're still paying for it, but it's going to be through your loan docs. But a home inspection is something that is, if you want to do that, to get a little bit more detailed and dig in, and then you get to pick that inspector who's going to dig in. Because you're going to be
like the appraiser, we're trying to find a value using comps or whatever. Where a home inspector, he doesn't care what the value is.
Nope.
Yeah.
He's looking for false flaws. And
he will find some. He will find 40 pages of faults.
A brand new house.
That's his job, and he feels like if he doesn't find faults, then he's not doing his job.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, in all seriousness, that is his job, is to find things wrong with the house.
But like I said before, there's no, in most of these counties, there's no guidelines for him to really follow.
Right.
And also, I have to be licensed. I'm state licensed.
Yeah.
A home inspector, any one of us could start home inspecting tomorrow.
We could.
You know, you might need a business license, whatever town you live in, but you don't have any classes you have to take.
And it'd be good if they carried E&O insurance too, probably.
Correct.
They should probably have that.
I think it's a requirement, honestly, right now.
Isn't it like with Missouri law, you can't go back on your home inspector?
It is.
That could
Missouri
be, I
is
don't
that
know.
way.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, if you can't, then why do they have to have E&O insurance?
It's
I guess the insurance company's got to get theirs.
Yeah.
But an appraiser in the state of Missouri doesn't have to have E&O insurance.
No.
A lot of us do, but I don't know about home inspectors if they actually have to have.
Yeah.
Well, I know some that do and some that don't, so I don't think it's a requirement.
Yeah.
But
Interesting.
have you ever appraised a home that did not have indoor plumbing?
Yes.
Like composting toilets type stuff?
Like, Mac, have you ever sold a home?
I did sell.
There's quite a few on
I guess there is like a lot of them over by Kidder.
I've done houses with no electricity, no plumbing. So,
Has that ever made you want to move into one of those homes?
Well, depends on what the what the weather is. Sometimes you feel like you live in one of those.
I mean, but within the last 24 hours, we had 78 degrees, you know, and some snow and some ice
and
and
it was
some
15
winds.
this morning.
Yes, yeah.
So without like indoor plumbing and electricity, I mean, obviously, does that have a negative effect on the value? Certainly it does, doesn't it? Or do you look at that as that's a norm for that area?
That's more it, because you can't say it's a negative because somebody's living in it now, and the person that buys it might not care.
And they're loving it.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
You know, maybe there's comp. You know, if you're writing up the appraisal on that property, maybe you're going to have a hard time finding comps, but you're just going to have to make an adjustment.
Yeah. And I will tell you, I'm not going to have enough comps for you on a compost.
No, but I did sell one house like that. It had electricity, but composting toilets. But it was way up in Adair County, and we had a lot of trouble with the loan on it because they didn't want to lend on it. But then we got in a big argument, and the appraiser said, well, they default to like the state guidelines for like plumbing and septic up there, and the guy really wanted to buy it, and the appraiser said that's kind of the norm for the county. It had because they have like over the hill septic up there. Have you heard of that?
There's some of that around.
Or you can daylight
it out. It depends on the county and whatever, however the zoning, and how much land you've got.
So that was fine up there that they didn't really have a septic system. Yeah. So I thought that was odd and weird.
There's those around and what you think.
Yeah, they're so interesting.
We call those unique properties.
Yeah,
unique properties.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you if you have any good appraisal stories, like showing up to a house and you're like, oh my God.
Get in those every once in a while where,
what's the best of the best?
You need to carry about 4 gallons of hand sanitizer and just dip yourself in. Or take your shoes off before you get in your own vehicle. You don't want to take that home with you.
Oh, yes.
Well, does anything stick out in your mind as the worst of the worst?
One time when I was appraising that Lake of the Ozarks.
Just one time, right?
Yeah. I went in this lakefront house, nice house, decent house. Man and woman, elderly, lived there. there was a dead possum on the couch.
On the couch?
And it was down to where it was just, it had already decomposed. It's there. And the guy was sitting in the living room, and I took a picture of this, and I said, "What's the deal here?" And he says, "We've been arguing about which one of us is going to clean that up." And that had gone on for like a year. And they lived in that house the whole time.
Were they like sitting on that couch next to that?
I suppose, I don't know, but it was in the living room.
It had to smell
Lord.
terrible.
It had to smell
like
terrible.
2 or 3 weeks after
Yeah.
it.
It had to be awful.
Make just you want to vomit.
Oh, my
I want to
gosh.
vomit now. Picturing it in my head.
Well, do you think
So
was it like their pet possum, or was it a possum that just
I don't
got
think
in
so.
and
But
died on the
yeah,
couch?
it just got in and died or something. Or
Again, it wants to
Yeah,
die
it wants
where
to
it's
die
warm.
inside.
Come inside,
more.
Come inside to die.
That was probably the nastiest one item I've seen, but
Wow,
we've been in
that's-
some pretty nasty houses too.
that's-
But you guys have too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
I've never seen a dead possum like that.
Yeah,
It's
me either.
decaying
On
the
somebody's
furniture.
couch when they were living.
I wonder if that should be our new motto: "Come inside to die."
Yeah.
I feel like that's it.
Die to get
Yes,
inside.
yes.
There you go.
Aw, fantastic. I'm doing a
That's
banner.
why we brought you here, just for that.
Die to get out. One of them.
He's probably dying to get out. He's like, "Oh, this crew."
No.
But it was a pretty neat story, him telling about they were arguing who was going to clean that up, and it had been
Oh
for
my gosh.
months.
And I didn't know you were an appraiser at the Lake of the
Yeah,
Ozarks.
that's where it started out.
Really?
Started out.
A lot of rednecks down there.
Yeah.
Like even,
But
like,
you know, you
more
talk-
so than me and Bob.
Yeah. you were talking about how houses in a subdivision are more like. There's a variety of houses there too, but a lot of times I do an appraisal, and you know, there's a lake house here and a lake house here. And you always had plenty of comps.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lakefront houses or
Yeah.
whatever, but yeah. It was a lot of fun taking a boat to go do an appraisal.
Oh,
instead
I
of having
bet.
to drive.
I bet that
In
wasn't.
the summertime, anyhow.
And not like today's
Yeah,
like
not
today, but
today,
yesterday.
yeah.
It would have
What
been
part of the
perfect.
lake were you on?
I was at the 74.5 mile marker.
Really? So you're just past,
Yeah, just past where your
Yeah.
where your place is.
yeah, right there,
Yeah.
within like 2 miles of
Yeah,
where.
yeah. In the summertime, it was great because you go across the lake and you be there in 10 or 15 minutes. But in the wintertime, that's like an hour and a half drive
Yes,
around
yeah.
to get to the other
Yeah.
side.
On windy, icy blacktop road.
What town
Yeah.
is yours?
North of
Edwards.
Edwards.
Okay.
Interesting.
But
Interesting.
we cut you off earlier, man.
No, that's okay. I don't even remember what I was going to say.
Well, you
That's all
had a
right.
question. You had a list of them there.
Well, no, I think we've talked about most of this. I wanted to ask your opinion about a different subject, which are appraisal management companies. I understand that when I'm trying to learn some stuff too, but on the lending side, when a lender orders an appraisal, a lot of times they'll use an appraisal management company. So they send their order to them, and then is the appraisal assigned to you, or do you see like the list and you pick them up, or how does it get to you?
You're normally on their list of, I don't know, 10 or 50 appraisers, and they send out like a group email, and whoever responds back there. You're not really on anybody's list. They're not out there where I can go grab them. And if I see that AMC on there, I'm usually just send that email right to the trash. I don't. There's a lot of us don't care to work for
Right.
agencies.
Yeah. Right.
Basically, there's a certain fee for an appraisal, and it varies.
Yeah.
It varies. But they're going to take their top cut out of it and then try to undercut you. Say an appraisal is $500, they're going to offer you $325 or
Yeah.
$350
Yeah.
and want you to bid it. You know. But yeah, there's a lot of us that I know that I'm friends with appraisers that they won't touch a.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I understand. I mean, you're spending a lot of time researching the property, going to the property, putting the report together.
The pictures.
Pictures,
Yeah.
and then maybe even, if there are some of those things that have to be done, then going back again to make sure that those repairs were made and stuff, and for, the appraisal management company to like take half of what you're supposed to be
For
making.
not doing
like,
a thing.
Right,
But the appraisal management company, there again, they always have their list of regulations or whatever. Like
Yep.
you got to make
So
sure
on
you take a
top
picture of
of-
all four sides of the house.
right.
Stuff we normally
Right.
do anyhow, but I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but they're usually more involved. It takes longer to do one because they want more commentary, more addendums in it, and percentage adjustments on comps. A lot of them are really strict about that. But in this area, like you say, if you
It's
got
hard, yeah.
It's a little tougher when you don't have the
Exact
six
cookie
exact
cutter
comps.
thing.
You know,
Yeah.
you don't, your houses aren't the same. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yep.
We have, I mean, because most of our nicer subdivisions are still, I mean, I think the newest would probably be in the 80s and the 90s of our newer build subdivisions. And none of them are cookie cutter. Lakeview has a few of their first few, like 5. They did very similar to each other just because people wanted to live in that cookie cutter subdivision. But after that, so those are the oldest, 5 houses in that subdivision. But after that, everybody's like, no, we don't want to look like our neighbors. So went crazy. But we have builders we only have 2 really larger contractors here in town. So there's a lot of people that whenever they did build back in the 80s and 90s, went and grabbed somebody from Kansas City or, So we've got really randomness from old historic houses. The next one's going to be, nice little cookie cutter, and then the next one's going to be a stucco house.
People call me from out of state and from Kansas City and St. Louis and whatever, and they're like, tell me about the neighborhoods in Chillicothe. What neighborhood do I want to be in? And I'm like, well, there's kind of all mixed up. I say, there might be a rental next to a house that needs to be torn down, next to one that's, like you said, like a double wide, next to like a nice new build, next to one that needs to be torn down. I don't know, all the neighborhoods, it's all kind of mixed up. So yeah, I'm sure that makes your job more difficult.
Well, I want to talk a little about, you touch on that builders.
Yeah.
And you used Lakeview out here as an example. I did a house out there on the corner not too long ago that the Votech boys had done.
Yep.
And that house was way, percentage-wise, cheaper than if a builder had done the whole thing, even though it's just as good a quality, just as nice a house. But I appraised it, no problem whatsoever, but you think, boy, this is going to be a good comp down the road. Well, it's not going to be because it's too cheap.
Absolutely. And that's why that application process to get those kids to build those, it's really fantastic. My brother was in it. My brother did a lot of work in here and did the remodel at the office and stuff like that. That's where he started, was working with the Votech in the school.
It's a great program.
It is a great program, and those contractors that come in and help those kids, I mean, they're teaching you really good work. And so
we need all that we can get, because this day and age,
we do, because nobody wants to
10 or 20 years down the road,
that's
going to be tight.
First.
Yeah. I guess that would be true. Good work ethic. Work ethic would be good.
They got to want to work first.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'd bet most of them boys that are in a program like that probably want to work.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Or they want a job when they're done working.
Yes.
Well, I think we've about answered a lot of questions anyway.
Yeah.
When did you start doing this, by the way? That was my one last question.
I actually started in 99.
99?
And I had a full-time job, and it took me about 4 years to get my apprenticeship, schooling, and all. So my first license was in 2004.
All right.
So I've actually been licensed for a little over 20 years, but been appraising for about 25.
Okay, well that brings up a good topic, but we don't have time today. So the next time you're back on here with us, I want to talk about 2008 and the big housing market crash and how
I can simplify that.
How appraisals changed from before that to after that.
We were just as busy before as after, because we're doing sales one year, we were doing repossessions the next.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
We were just as busy, and maybe
it's just not as fun conversation.
And maybe we're coming up on that again. I don't know.
People may have been a little grumpier at that point in time.
We might be. So anyway, so I think we're done here today. We still have not worked on our ending tagline.
Yeah.
We gotta do that.
Come inside to die.
Come inside.
Or dying to get inside.
Dying to get inside.
All right. Well,
Might be dying to leave.
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thanks
We
for
are
having me.
so glad that people are hopefully still even listening to us.
Yep.
So, but another broker's disclosure episode
In the books.
In the books.
Dying to get inside.